Good afternoon, students. So today I'm going to talk about how writing a research paper is just like Star Trek and space exploration. Now, how could that be possible? Well, when we write and when we're interested in doing a research paper, we are exploring. We are exploring our curiosity. We, just like Star Trek explores the galaxy, because we are curious about what's going to happen next. We're curious about our topic. And so that is what researching is all about. Research is an endless quest, exploration of knowledge, of getting to know your topic, getting to know what it is, and also quenching that curiosity. And so that's what got the Enterprise out there in space, is to explore what's out there. And so when we're researching something, we have an actual knowledge, actual motivation, that we want to know what's going to happen next. We want to know more about our topic. And so in order to do the research, there is a writing process, there is a research process. First, you got to come up with your own research question. What is it are you interested in? What do you want to research? You could research something that you like to read, you could research a hobby, you could research something related to your major. But whatever it is, it's got to be something you're passionate about, something that you feel something for. And so for me, research is just like exploration. And just like exploration, research could be like forever. You could keep researching until your curiosity runs out. So the very first thing you do when we research is that we come up with a research question. Basically, a research question is, what is it you want to research? What is it you're interested in? And so this first part of the research process is just like the pre-writing of the writing process, where you're still trying to come up with the research question. What am I interested in? What do I want to research? And then the answer to that research question becomes your thesis statement. So in my case, I'm interested in science fiction. I've always been a Trekkie all my life. And so I decided, okay, my research question would be, what is science fiction like around the world? Do the science fiction stories from around the world reflect the society, cultural values of that country? So that was my initial research question. And then in order to answer that question, I have to do a literature review. And so that means reading a lot of books, looking up articles, scrolling the internet, and this is where the exploration of research becomes fun, because here you're on a quest for knowledge. You're trying to figure out, well, is science fiction written in other countries different and based on their cultural values? I also started reading stories, African science fiction, South American science fiction, Chinese science fiction, Asian science fiction, all the different kinds of science, Russian science fiction, in order to answer my initial research question. Is that are science fiction stories written based on the culture from which they originated? And as I was reading it, because I came off of this, originally, all I knew about science fiction was American science fiction, like Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov with I, Robot, and Star Trek, and Star Wars. And so I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, to find out that every country in every region of the world has their own science fiction. How did I find that out? I found that out through research. Yeah, once again, research means that reading. You read, you search, research, get it? You read and you search for the answer to your research question. And that's what makes, for me, research engaging. When we once we find a topic, okay, so now I'm still in pre-writing. Once you find a topic, then you're hooked. You've got to find out more. And research, it's like this hunger that never ends. And so once you have your research thesis statement, So that the answer to that research question is yes. Every country writes its own kind of research, writes its own kind of science fiction stories based on its cultures. Then my next research question became, what cultural values, does each country pour into their science fiction story, right? So how does each science fiction story reflect that individual, country's values? So as I did the research, I'm still in pre-writing, by the way. As I did the research, I found out that for American science fiction, it's all about individualism, exploration, diversity, equality. Those are some of the traits, and being able to work together and overcoming differences, no matter who you are, what color skin you are, where you come from, working together for the common good. So that's American science fiction, based on American values. And then I read, say, African science fiction. I read Binti, I read Africa Risen, I read Dark Matters. Those are all anthology books. One of them is a novel. And I found out the answer to my research question was, for African science fiction, it's about nature, your connection with nature, connection to your family, connection to tradition, loyalty. And those are everything nature and organic. For instance, in an African science fiction story, the spaceship is alive. The spaceship is made out of plant material. Okay, it's not a machine. So that's one way in which it's almost as if the Spaceship Enterprise was one big plant. Okay, so, and you've got leaves growing. So this shows to the reader the African connection to nature, and how even when Africans travel out into space, they have to maintain that connection with nature. And the conflicts that evolve in African science fiction, for instance, is the conflict between the individual versus the group. And just like with Chinese science fiction, the group is more important than the individual. So if Binti decides she wants her own individual ambitions, but then that goes against the interest of her family, that's where the conflict in the story would take place. Is that by you're supposed to be a good little girl, you're supposed to obey your family. So in this way, African culture and Asian culture align. And so that's what makes African science fiction interesting. Of course, this video is not about the difference between American and African science fiction. It's just about, does each country have its own values? So here I've done my research, and now that I've gathered up all the different countries, and then I've written out all of the different values, which I'll show you in a different video. Then you get into the writing then you get into the second stage of the writing process, which is you turn your outline into a 5-paragraph essay, and you start to write it out in paragraph form. And so as you write your research paper, you have to make sure that you use credible sources, so that you have a credible paper. And so we use Kapow. So we make sure that the articles are written within 10 years. C, A, that the author is an expert. P, that the purpose of the article is not an advertisement. O, that it's objective, so you would write it in third-person case. P, that the purpose is professional and has a thesis statement with, evidence and to back up the thesis. And so when we write a research paper, we are reporting to the reader what we've discovered in our research. So I would write in my paper, wow, African values in science fiction are blank, blank, and blank. Chinese values are blank, blank, and blank. And so I read, for that one, I read The Three-Body Solution. I even watched The Three-Body Solution on 10%. That's the name of a YouTube channel. So you can watch the whole first season. It's translated into English, and it's very interesting to watch the Chinese version of Three Bodies Solution. Then if you have Netflix, you can watch the American version and then compare. So that was part of my research. All of that was part of my research to answer my original research question, that do different countries have different kinds of science fiction stories outside of Star Trek and Ray Bradbury. So that was my original research question. So now I'm in the writing stage where I've gathered all of this research, and now I'm going to write all my research results in a paper. And so basically, after a lot of research, you write the results of your research, methodology and all of that into one paper that's credible. So that's called the writing stage. And so all of this research is an exploration of knowledge, an exploration of something that you're very, very curious about. And in my case, science fiction, hence this background, hence this science fiction outfit. And so then the last stage of the writing process is, now that you've written everything down in paragraph format, then you want someone to read it over. You want to correct for mistakes, to make sure that your essay structure makes sense, and to make sure you have no punctuation mistakes, and to make sure you have correct APA formatting. So that's the last thing you do. That's the last stage, is the rewriting. So remember, the 3 stages of the writing process is pre-writing, writing, and rewriting. And so now we're in the last stage. You revise your paper and you can have somebody look it over. I also advise people to just walk away from the paper for a while, take a break, because we become too close to our paper. And so when we become too close to our paper, we're not able to see our mistakes anymore. So for me, I love doing research. When I was a student, I had 88 pages in my bibliography. A, because I love to read. B, I read really fast. And even my professor was amazed at how many pages I was able to create. And this was before the internet too. So that just shows my love of reading. And I want to share my love of reading, my love of the exploration of knowledge with my students. So that research is not just simply an assignment that you do for your English composition class, but that research is something you do because you love to learn. You love to learn about something new. You're curious about the world around you. And therefore, research is like an exploration of what's out there where nobody has gone before. And so I had these notes that I was going to share the screen with, but I figure that if I just talk off the top of my head, it's much more interesting. I'll give you a story. When I was in France, so my French wasn't very good because French is not my first language. And so during the first part of my oral presentation, I was so nervous. I was reading from these notes, and I looked out at the audience. They were all falling asleep. This was in France, so that all the other students were French, and I was speaking in French at the time. So then the teacher said, okay, you have only 2 more minutes to your presentation before we go on to the next student. I was only halfway through my presentation. So I put down my notes and I started speaking very fast so that I could finish, to the last line so that I can get my grade. And as soon as I started speaking myself and not using notes, everybody woke up. And then everybody said, you should have been doing that in the beginning. Just talk off the top of your head, Anyway, so basically that's why I decided I did this off the top of my head. Although frankly, I think if I read from my notes, I write better than I speak, but it doesn't keep people's attention for some reason. So anyway, getting back to my thesis is that research is fun. And research can be fun as long as you choose a topic you're interested in. And then you make it your passion. You have your research question. Then the answer to that research question is your thesis statement and your outline. Then in the writing stage, you write your rough draft, and then you have someone, and then in the last stage, rewriting, you have someone look it over. So for me, the whole purpose of this video is I want to share my love of learning and share my love of exploring the world with my students, so that my students walk away from my classes, ENGO 101, 105, and 115, respectively, with a similar love of reading and writing. Remember, the more you read, the better you write. So if you have any questions, so that means I didn't even bother. I spent so much time writing these notes, and then I don't end up using it. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me.